In this video, I'll be walking you through the application trace facility feature available within the OMEGAMON for Db2 Enhanced 3270 interface. So let's go ahead and get started. As a Db2 DBA, typically you rely on the Db2 accounting class traces to give you information related to all the threads and applications that are running in your Db2 environment. Typically, majority of the time, this gives you adequate information to be able to adequately monitor your applications, and it gives you the necessary information to identify some of your most costly SQL that might be running out there that you potentially have to go out and do some tuning. Um, in the event that you need to get into more detailed information about a specific problematic application, the accounting class traces may not be enough detail for you, and you might have to resort to having to use your DB2 performance traces. So what the application trace facility is going to allow you to do is be able to do an on-demand start of DB2 performance traces for specific applications. So within the ATF facility in the Enhanced 3270 interface, you're going to find filtering criteria that you're going to be able to identify the specific application that you're going to want to trace. So typically things like plan name, auth ID, collection ID, etc. So and allow you to focus in on that specific application. It's also then going to allow you to schedule when you want the trace to run, as well as specify the duration. So you can do it on demand, ad hoc, or maybe you want to specify a specific date and time that you know the application will be running. Might be after work hours as an example. So whatever that is, the facility is going to allow you to schedule those traces. The data that's collected by the trace is going to be collected in a VSAM file that you are then going to be able to view online through the ATF interface. There is no in-memory trace option in the Enhanced 3270 UI. For those of you that may have used the older versions of OMEGAMON using the classic interface, you had the option of doing in-memory or VSAM. Now in the Enhanced 3270, the information is always going to be written out to disk via a VSAM file. So to access the application trace facility, you would use option F from the main OMEGAMON DB2 screen. Once you select that option, a window is going to open up that's going to show you a series of tabs. So with these different tabs, you're going to be able to do things like create the VSAM data set. You're going to be able to specify all your trace filter criteria, as well as view the existing trace output online. So let's go ahead and walk through these different options. And I'm going to step you through exactly how to set this up and monitor an application. So the first step in setting up the ATF or application trace facilities, you need to create your trace data set, which again is a VSAM file. This data set, so basically you're going to specify the name of the data set and the size. And the size could be up to 2 gigabytes. And this is something that you can do once and reuse this data set. I'll talk about that more as we get into when we kick off the trace. Or you may want to keep unique files for each trace of each application that you run. So it's really up to you. Some people like to have, again, the individual trace files per application that they can reference in the future, or you may want to have a generic data set out there that you just reuse over and over again. So depending on your use case, it's really up to you to decide that. So let's go ahead and move on to specifying our trace criteria. Okay, so once we have our VSAM file allocated, we're ready to start specifying our trace criteria. So we're going to go over to the very first tab, which is the Define ATF. And as you'll see, it automatically actually filled in the data set that I just allocated under the Create Data Set DSN. And you'll notice over to the right of that, the mode option of which can be either reuse or append. So if you want to just use the same trace file for new traces and just overwrite what was in there, that's what the reuse option will do. If I want to continue collecting data and appending onto the existing collection, I could specify the append option. For duration, remember this is going to be running DB2 performance traces, which could be quite costly. So you want to be cautious with how long you want to run these. So in my example here, I've got my duration set to 1. Um, Again, I want to minimize that overhead, right, to my DB2 environment. And then the flush interval is how often do you want any units of work that have completed being written out to the vsam file. So in my example, I've got that set to 5 seconds. So typically 5 to 10 seconds is usually a pretty good interval to use there, so you can adjust that accordingly. And you can optionally specify a start date and time. So if you have an application that runs maybe on Tuesdays at 11 p.m., I can put that date and time in here so it will automatically kick off the application trace. I don't have to be physically online or looking at a screen or clicking on a button. It'll be automatically started for the specified duration. And then on the bottom half is where I start specifying my trace qualifiers. So in my example, I've got 2 plans specified, DSN Rex and the DB2 PM plan. So again, whatever criteria makes sense, if it's a specific collection ID or auth ID or package or a Kix transaction, whatever it might be, this is where you want to qualify it, right, to get as specific as possible, right, to focus in on the application that you're looking to monitor. Once you get all that criteria specified, we're going to go ahead and we're going to click the next button at the bottom, which is going to take us to the start application trace window. Okay, so once we clicked on the next button under the Define ATF tab, it'll automatically switch you over to the Start ATF or Start the Trace screen. And from within here, you can see you can continue to specify some additional end user qualifiers. So if you have things like end user ID, workstation, or specific application, again, as well as routines. So you can qualify those here. And then on the bottom are what DB2 performance traces do I want to start? Do I want to collect static SQL? Do I want to collect SQL data? Do I want to collect host variables? Do I want to collect lock data, thread data, et cetera, et cetera? So every one of those that you turn on is going to turn on the appropriate or corresponding DB2 performance traces. So again, you have to be cautious, right? Because you are going to be incurring overhead with every one of these that you turn on, particularly when you start collecting things like lock data. And if you want a better understanding of specifically what traces are started, you can click the Help button down below, and it will break down each of those individual trace details and show you specifically which DB2 performance class traces will be started. So once you get those flags turned on to the things that you want to collect, you're going to go ahead and you're going to click the Start ATF. If this was ad hoc where you don't have a start time or a date, this will start immediately. Otherwise, it will get scheduled within the started task and start accordingly to the date time that you have specified on the previous screen. Okay, so once you've initiated your trace, you can then switch over to the Trace Queue tab, and then you can view the status of your trace activity. So you'll see here in the screenshot, I clicked on the Queue Trace tab, and what that'll do then is it will show me what sort of trace activity has been going on, and this will be kept in this display for as long as your data collector on this particular subsystem has been up. So as far as status goes, you got 3 potential statuses here. You either got executing, so you've got a trace actually actively running. Then you've got complete, which means that a trace has run and it has completed. Then you also have obsolete. So remember, you can either do append or reuse as your options when you start your trace. So if I did a reuse and I overwrote an old collection, it would then show that one as being obsolete. So that means I can no longer view that data. So once I've gone in here, what I can do then is I can start viewing the contents of my trace. Okay, so we've completed our trace collection. Now we're ready to start visualizing what we collected. So you're going to have 2 options here. One is that you're going to be able to view the trace summary as well as then get into the details of the specific SQL and activity that was collected during the trace. So let's start with the trace summary. So you see here on the top, I've got my queued trace display. I've got my line that has my completed trace file. I go ahead and I put a V next to that, and then that will bring up the view trace details. So within here, then you can see just a summary of what and when it was collected. So you see a status of complete, that it was a normal execution, the date, no start and end times, how many records were captured. So you can see I actually captured 369,349 records within this. So again, just a summary overview of the collection. So next, what we'll want to do is we'll actually want to go in now and start viewing the detail collection data that we had just recorded. So in order to view the trace details, what we would do instead of putting a V next to the collection, we would either do an S next to the collection or just switch the tab. So remember when we did the V, we were over on the View Trace tab. We could have just simply click on the View DSN Summary tab, or from the original trace status screen, I could put an S against that collection and it jumps right into the details. So within here, you can see I've got my two plans that I had collected data for, DSN Rex and Db2 PM. Again, the summary statistics for those two plans. And then what I can do is start drilling in on these. So you'll see now I'm going to select my DSN Rex plan, and now I'm going to start seeing the trace detail. So once I select that plan, you'll see now that I've got all the units of work that were collected. So you see each of those intervals are individual units of work, and again with the summary information. So you can see that the one that's about 4 down, I have my SQL activity as an example of 594 SQLs, and so I may want to drill into that. So you pick the one that you want to drill into, and then you're going to get again continue to drill in. So now you're going to see the different SQL activity that was captured. So I got some cursor open, some fetching, some closing, and then there's a select. So I clicked on the select statement, and then that drills me into the specific SQL statement, where I can then have different tabs. So again, depending on what it is that I collected, did I collect lock information? Did I collect event information? Weight type information? So I could click on the different tabs to get the different levels of detail of information that was collected. So the final section of the ATF option is the View DSN tab. This is just going to allow me to go in and interrogate an existing file that I have, or trace file that I have collected. So here's the file that that I used to run my traces that I walked through in the previous screens. Now I want to go in and search for some specific criteria where I've got a plan name and a specific user ID, auth ID. And then also down on the bottom, you notice there that I only want to view trace records that had more than 500 SQL calls. So once I get that information specified, I click the View DSN tab at the bottom, which will then bring up a list of everything that met my selection criteria. So in this example, I found I've got 2 trace records there that fit my criteria of greater than 500 SQL calls for this particular plan and user, which I can then start drilling in again to go down into the specific SQL detail. That concludes the overview of the application trace facility as part of the OMEGAMON for Db2 Enhanced 3270 interface. I hope you found this informative. If you have additional questions, please feel free to reach out to our Z Concierge email, zconcierge@rocketsoftware.com. We'll be more than happy to answer any questions or schedule a consultation or live demo of this. So look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.